Hi, I'm here with Sam, and today we're going to be talking about the poetry of Emily Dickinson. Sam, do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a big fan of Emily Dickinson's poetry. I was first introduced to her, I think, in high school, but I ended up studying her while I was doing my master's in American literature at NC State University in North Carolina. While I was there, I also took a really excellent course at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill with Dr. Eliza Richards, who's an expert in Emily Dickinson. Um, After grad school, I did a little bit of additional research into Dickinson's poetry, paying special attention, I guess, to her rhymes and this sort of doing some linguistic analysis of the rhymes of Emily Dickinson.
Cool, thank you. And so to start with, do you want to talk a little bit about her biography, kind of maybe a few facts about her life and how we have her poetry now?
Yeah, she is a sort of unusual poet in that way, I think, uh, largely because during her lifetime, she wrote a ton of poems, over 1,700 poems, but only a few were ever published during her lifetime. I think, depending on how you count, like 10 to 12, or maybe a few more than that. Um, and some of the ones that were published weren't even published with her permission, others weren't published with her name. And so um, she, as we'll see, and we'll talk about more later, had complicated feelings, I think, about the publication of her poems, even though, of course, she was also an avid reader of other people's poems. And
Hmm.
we can talk about that more later. She ended up in the last part of her life being maybe, I think recluse is a little bit too strong a word, but she was very withdrawn. She spent a lot of time on her own. Um, and so we'll see, I think, some in the poems why that might be the case. But she's a really
Hmm.
interesting figure. Um, so only after her death did her family find this treasure trove of poems. They knew that she had been writing, of course, but I don't know if they knew exactly how extensive it was. And so after her death, a lot of her poems were published, and I think at this point, um, they've there's been a substantial amount of scholarship dedicated to finding all of them, editing the text of all of them, and then of course analyzing them.
Hmm. And I believe she was born, well, it says here December 10th, 1830, and she died May 15th, 1886. Was there a specific, um, I guess, like period of literature or poetry that she was part of? Like any name for the era or anything?
Yeah, not a really catchy name. She was alive during the period of the Transcendentalists, which is a sort of school of American literature with Emerson and some other major names in that school. Um, Sometimes she's read as belonging to that school. I don't know how appropriate that is, but
Hmm.
I think that she's often just read in the context of other 19th century American poets like Whitman and so on.
Hmm. Right. So I know there are a few other authors, like Kafka comes to mind, and he had a lot of unpublished work that he actually wanted burned after his death, but his friend went and published it anyways. So, do we kind of consider um, people's work when they pass away to be kind of fair game to publish to whoever it passes to? Like, is there any kind of ethics of that we think of with this?
Yeah, probably different people disagree, have different opinions on this question. Um, I think it would be a tremendous loss to English speakers everywhere if they didn't have access to these wonderful poems. And so I'm glad that they were published, even if that's not what she wanted during her lifetime. Now, she did leave some of the poems in really careful editions, written out by hand, but very neatly on pages and hand sewn, bound into these what are called fascicles, as if to preserve them for posterity. So it's hard, I think,
Okay,
to say what her intent exactly was, but regardless of that, I'm glad that we have them.
right. But I guess she didn't say that, like, she didn't leave any notes about what she wanted done with them. She didn't say, like, destroy them. She didn't say publish them.
Yeah, I don't really know off the top of my head. She was
Hmm.
definitely in contact with publishers during her lifetime. And if she had wanted them all to be published during her lifetime, I think she would have done so. But it's hard to.
Okay. And one last question before we start. So can you give some context? Like, was it common for like women's poetry to be published, or like was it mainly men that got published in that time?
Yeah, it was definitely disproportionately men, but there were also well-known women poets by that period. Not a lot of them were what we would think of as like professional writers who were, earning a living off their publications, but there were some. Um, so in that way, what Dickinson was doing wasn't totally revolutionary in terms of writing a lot of poems. So I think that she can be read within the context of other women poets of that period.
Cool. Thank you. And so you picked about five poems that you want to talk about today. So should we start with the first of these now?
Yeah, let's start with the first one. And I think it's good to enter this one with the mindset that it's a kind of a riddle. It's definitely not the case that all of Dickinson's poems are a riddle, but I think that this first
Hmm.
one is in a certain way. And I think that this is a good one to start with because it can give us a sort of idea of what Dickinson is up to in her poems. This is going to be read from the Franklin edition. This is Franklin number 383. And like most of her poems, there's no title. So we often just refer to the poems by the first line of the poem.
Hmm. Cool. Yeah, sounds good.
I like to see it lap the miles and lick the valleys up and stop to feed itself at tanks and then, prodigious, step around a pile of mountains and supercilious peer in shanties by the sides of roads and then a quarry pair to fit its sides and crawl between complaining all the while in horrid hooting stanza, then chase itself downhill and neigh like Boanerges, then, prompter than a star, stop, docile and omnipotent, at its own stable door.
Nice.
So
So
I think
yeah,
the
go
first
ahead.
question here is, what's the answer to the riddle? In other words, what is it that Dickinson is describing here?
Um, right. So I think when I like started reading the first few stanzas, I thought she might be talking about like a sunrise, for example, but then I assumed she was talking about a horse.
There's a lot of
Is
horse imagery, right? It's stopping to feed
yeah.
itself, it's licking, it's obviously traveling, it neighs toward the end, right? And it ends at its own stable door. So there's a lot of
Hmm.
horse imagery. But the answer to the riddle here, which may be surprising, is actually the train. So this is a locomotive. And I think
Oh,
when you read the poem with that in mind, it all becomes really clear, right? So it's lapping the miles and licking the valleys up. That's just it traveling miles, traveling through the valleys. It stops to feed
okay.
itself at tanks, right? So a steam engine needs water to operate, so it has to refill its water, and so on and so forth. Uh, a quarry, it's going to pair a quarry to fit its sides and crawl between the quarry, right? So this is the process of like laying the track through mountainous terrain, and then
Okay.
it complains in hooting stanza, so that's the sound of the train's horn, and then finally it stops at its own stable door, so that's the train station. Uh,
Okay. So it's almost like tricking you into thinking it's talking about a horse, but it's actually a train. Is that right?
yeah, that's right, and I think this is an important realization to help us understand what Dickinson is up to in some of these poems. Is like a lot of poets, she's really interested in comparison and analogy and metaphor. And so
Hmm.
the fact that the train neighs like a horse, or that it stops to feed itself, or it's licking up the valleys, um, is obviously it's not quite a personification; it's a animalification
Right.
of the train, which is sort of misdirection in terms of the riddle. But
Okay.
it's also, I think, supposed to help us help the reader to see the ways that trains are similar to these natural things like animals.
Right. And I guess were trains kind of replacing horses during her lifetime? Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's right. And in fact, her father
Okay.
was involved with bringing the train to Amherst where they lived. And so she would have been able to hear the train from her own home. And so this kind of horrid hooting stanza that we get is something that she would have been familiar with. So th this was modern technology at the time, and here she is pointing out the ways in which it resembles the natural world.
Okay, that's kind of interesting. So once you know that she's actually talking about a train, it almost, like you said, brings to mind like the sort of like passage of time and of technology. But I guess if you think it's just about a horse, you don't really get that in there.
Yeah, that's
There's
right.
kind of layers to it.
Yeah, there are a lot
Um,
of layers, and in addition to just comparing it to an animal like a horse, she's also comparing it to this Boanerges, which I think to the lay reader is just totally mysterious, right? It's going to neigh like Boanerges. What is that? Is that the name of a horse? Is that some famous horse from history?
mhm.
Weirdly, that Boanerges is a Greek word. It's from the New Testament in the Bible, and it refers to these sons of thunder, James and John. Um, and by the time of Dickinson's writing, it had come to mean like a really loud preacher. And so, weirdly, the neigh
Okay.
like Boanerges isn't actually a horse reference. It's a reference to like someone with a loud voice.
Huh. Okay, that's interesting. And so she uses a lot of dashes or hyphens in her poetry. What do you take from that compared to a line break? Is
Yeah,
is it just like kind of a gap in speech, but like what's the difference between the two?
yeah, it's a really interesting question, and this is one of the first things everyone notices when they read Dickinson because the dashes are so distinctive. They She uses them in a lot of different ways. Sometimes a dash is a comma, sometimes a dash is a period, sometimes a dash is even less than a comma. She'll put it between two words where you wouldn't put a comma, and it maybe just sort of indicates a pause for breath, or
Hmm.
sometimes they're used for like purely syntactical reasons, like to show which words belong together and which words need to be separated. Sometimes it's just for emphasis. It's hard to know with any given dash, or without reference to any specific dash, what they mean generally because she uses them so in such a varied manner.
Okay, so it's maybe almost kind of like one of those breath marks in sheet music.
Yeah, that's right.
I forget what
It's
that's
it's
called.
often that. Yeah, and sometimes it's something else, and um, she pretty much abandons all other punctuation. This is just her all-purpose punctuation mark.
Hmm. It kind of reminds me of how old people sometimes end text in ellipses for no reason.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, this is the boomer ellipsis of the
Hmm.
1860s for sure.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So I guess more of a general question for people who study poetry. I guess what might be like the purpose she sets out for when writing something like this, kind of like uh not taking into account the obvious things like entertainment or um like because she felt like it, like why poetry specifically, or and like why write this poem, I guess
Yeah,
I might ask.
it's a great question, and I suspect that different poets would answer it differently. I think for Dickinson, it comes from a lot of kind of motives. Some of it, sometimes I get the sense reading her poems that she had a thought that she had really been mulling over for a long time, and it had become like compressed and kind of abstracted, and it's like this. By the end, some of them are like they're like gems. They're like jewels. They're really fine and they've been crafted and they've been the result of tremendous pressure and things like this. And by the end, there's like this little diamond and it sparkles, right? Like a lot of them are really oddly beautiful, I think. Um, so sometimes I think that she has something inside that she's trying to get out. It's sort of like self-expression. I think sometimes there's pride of craftsmanship to say, look at this thing that I've made.
Mhm.
Those are separate questions, I think, from what should we expect to get from the poem. But that is, I think, it goes at least a little bit of the way to explaining why she wrote them in the first place.
So maybe from what I'm getting, part of the point is like to evoke like a specific emotion in the reader, like to make you feel something she has felt that almost like can't be described. Because I guess like the poem isn't really like describing a feeling. I saw this kind of interesting like quote on the back of a book at the bookstore yesterday. I think it was by like Samuel Beckett. And it was like this guy's writing. It's like he doesn't write about something, like the writing is the thing itself.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't know if you've
exactly
heard
right.
that.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
think that one way to think about the difference between poetry and prose, this isn't always true, but I think this is often a helpful way of thinking about it, is thinking about the difference between like a normal window, where the point of a window is for you to look through the glass to see the thing outside. So it sort of frames where you're going to look and it enables you to see the object on the other side, versus like a stained glass window, where you're not meant to
Mm,
be able to see through it. It's supposed to be something that you look at. And I think prose is often a normal window where the author is trying to show you something on the other side. And it's important that the window be clean and clear so that you can see the thing on the other side. Whereas with stained glass, the point isn't to see through. The poem is the thing that you're looking at. And there's beauty in the craftsmanship of the thing that you're looking at. Though that's not
okay.
always true.
That's
Obviously, poems are about things, right? They're not just things to be looked at. But I think that that can be a helpful way to think about the difference.
okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. Cool. So should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's go on to the next one. I think that the train poem is interesting, but it's obviously not of tremendous philosophical significance, probably, unless maybe you're thinking about the history of technology. This next one, I think, is of greater philosophical interest. This is again from the Franklin, number 788. Publication is the auction of the mind of man. Poverty be justifying for so foul a thing, possibly. But we would rather from our garret go white unto the white Creator than invest our snow. Thought belonged to him who gave it, then to him who bare its corporeal illustration. Sell the royal air in the parcel. Be the merchant of the heavenly grace, but reduce no human spirit to disgrace of price.
Hmm. Yeah, this one I found a lot more enigmatic, I guess. But I think what I come away with on a like first, second, third reading is um I think part of what she's talking about is like selling your written work and like making money from it is kind of like it disgraces the work itself. Is that
Yeah, that's
accurate?
exactly right. I think we should step through maybe line by line here and make sure that we understand
Okay.
exactly what she's saying, because this one,
Yeah.
like a lot of her poems, is really compressed. So she's communicating a lot of things in very few words, and it's easy, I think, to get confused. So
Hmm.
publication is the auction of the mind of man. That's actually startlingly clear, and a lot of her poems start with one line that's kind of really sharp, right? So what is she saying here?
Yeah.
She's saying if you're going to publish written works for pay, what you're doing is you're auctioning off the product of your own mind, right? It's the auction of the mind of man. Um, and
Hmm.
now she compares it to, well, she has a remark about this. Poverty be justifying for so foul a thing possibly, right? In other words, maybe if you're really poor, you would be justified in auctioning off your own mind, right, by publishing something. Possibly this would be justified, poverty justify so foul a thing as publication. This is a
Okay.
surprising outlook, especially for a writer, right? To say that publication is a foul thing, but maybe if you're poor, it can be justified.
So can we break down? Well, okay, one question. So in my version, I assume it looks the same in yours. It's like poverty dash be justifying.
Yes,
Or well, okay, maybe a better question is publication dash is the auction. Why, what do you think that dash is doing there? Just like it seems a little strange to have a pause between like I guess the subject and the predicate.
that's right. Yeah, it's very surprising. I think here with both publication dash is the auction and poverty dash be justifying. I think that it's just to emphasize the word that comes before, which is, again,
Okay.
it's not how we use punctuation in standard writing, but that's how I read it here. It's not a comma, it's not a period, it's not really even a pause as I read it. I just think it's emphasis,
So almost like italicized? Like did they use
almost like
that back?
italicized, or maybe sort of the way that in some casual writing you would use an exclamation point. I mean, not because you're excited about it,
Hmm.
but just to lend emphasis. So here
Right.
she
Okay.
is. Publication is a foul thing. Maybe if you're poor, it could be justified. She says, but we, and this is the authorial we, right? This is the writer, the speaker of the poem. We would rather from our garret go white unto the white creator. So first off, what's a garret here?
So
This
like
is,
a
yeah,
yeah,
this is,
like a little kind of like tower suite you live in almost
that's right.
in
Yeah,
the
it's
olden
the
days.
artist's loft of
Right.
the
Okay.
period, right? This is where it's cheaper to live up there because it's really cold or hot in the summer, I guess. It's poorly insulated, it's cramped quarters, and so it's where a writer or an artist lives.
Okay. And okay, now reading this again, is it like is she saying go white as in die? Like,
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think the way I read white here is pure. So I think that
oh,
she is imagining publication as a kind of a stain. So she's saying, maybe if you're really poor, publication is justified, but not it's not for me. I'm going to go white unto my white creator. So when I go to meet God, I'm going to be unmarked, unstained by this flaw, which is having sold something that shouldn't be sold, right? I think
okay.
one way that we can be persuaded of this reading is first off, the creator is also white. This isn't like a racial
Hmm.
thing here, I don't think. It's just the
Yeah.
creator is also pure, holy, right? Um, and but also, we would rather go white than invest our snow. So our snow here is also white, right? It's pure. I think the snow is the writings. So
The writings or
invest
maybe the
here,
ideas that go into the writing.
that's right. The idea is in the, yeah, the mind of man, right? This is the
Hmm.
snow. And invest has a double meaning here, which I think is so clever. So invest is both like make an investment, like expect a monetary return from something. So we're not going to invest our snow, which is to say we're not going to sell it for publication. But also invest can mean to like wrap in clothes, right? Like to put a vest on, to invest.
Oh.
And so we're not going to like cover them up. We're going to let them be pure and white. Um, and so there's this brilliant double meaning here. So let's pause, I think,
D-
really quick because I have an important question, which is
mhm,
why would she be opposed to selling written works? She loves to read the written works of other poets.
mhm.
What's so foul about offering ideas for sale?
Um, is it that she's fine with other people doing it, but she doesn't want to like pollute herself?
It could be, yeah. We would rather go, right? White. I
Hmm.
think part of it is she has this idea, she puts it in this category of things that I think a lot of people um, would agree with. For instance, there are certain things that just shouldn't be sold, right? Like maybe you're opposed to slavery. I know I am. Uh, People are not the sort of thing that should be sold, right? A lot of people are opposed to prostitution. Maybe sex is just not something that should be sold. I think Dickinson feels the same way that the thoughts of our mind, our writings, our creations are too important. They're too dignified to disgrace by offering them for sale.
So they should be free then, almost. Like not that
May
you shouldn't like not that you shouldn't share your writing at all, just you shouldn't get payment for it.
Something like that. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so let's carry on. I think we're really getting somewhere
Yeah.
with this.
Okay.
So the next stanza starts, thought belonged to him who gave it. So in other words, our thoughts are not our own. The we're not who gave it. We're the one it's being given to. So she says, thoughts belong, I think we're supposed to read here, to God, right? Uh, First,
Hmm.
they belong to him who gave it, then to him who bare its corporeal illustration. So there's this sort of like transfer of ownership, right? God owns your ideas, he gives them to you, and then you bear its corporeal illustration. You give it a body, you write it down, you turn the idea into something.
Is there also I don't know if it corresponds to this poem, but I've heard people say before, like I think Nietzsche kind of thought this, like that we have ideas and then like even by putting them into words, we kind of mangle them.
Yeah,
Like
we
so that
diminish them
nothing
somehow. Yeah.
yeah, is she saying kind of the same thing here, or is she only just talking about selling the
Yeah, I
works?
think she's mostly interested in ownership, but
Okay.
you're right to think that corporeal illustration, that the like giving something a body, the like infleshing of an idea, that could be a kind of diminishment.
Right, because I guess like the I don't know if there's like a name for this kind of Christian idea is that like the like body is like sinful and like spirit is pure, I guess you might
Yeah,
say.
yeah, that would be a sort of Gnostic view, right? That like the flesh
Oh, really?
is worldly, it's dirty, it's impure, and the spirit is light and clean. And yeah, that's a sort of Gnostic idea, or sometimes called Manichaean.
So that's not like general Christian. I thought it was.
Yeah, there are definitely some passages of Paul's writings in particular, I think, that are sometimes read that way. I think that most churches today teach against what's sometimes called the Gnostic heresy, that like there's good and evil, and the spirit is all good, and the world is all evil, or the flesh is all evil. Um,
Oh, okay. That makes more sense.
yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Okay, so we're
And
really
then
getting somewhere
next
here.
part.
We're in the home stretch. She says here, and I think that it's important to read this dash as it's almost as big as a stanza break. It's really big after corporeal illustration. We have another dash. Then now she says, sell the royal heir in the parcel. So she says, I think you should read this as saying, you might as well sell the royal heir in the parcel as try to sell a publication, as try to sell your ideas.
Okay, and the royal heir meaning like
Yeah,
oh just the heir. Like
just the heir,
you
or
might as
maybe,
well
yeah,
sell heir.
maybe this is the air that the king or queen has breathed. I don't know what the royal air is exactly, but she's saying air is free, right? It would be an
Right. Okay.
abomination to try to sell the air. You might as well sell the royal air in the parcel, bottle it up and offer it for sale, right? You might as
Okay.
well be the merchant of the heavenly grace, right? Offer salvation at a price. These, I think,
What
are she takes to be cases of things that would be either silly to sell or probably just wrong to sell, right? You shouldn't be selling air to people. That should be free. You can't sell salvation to people. So you might as well
and
sell the royal air, be the merchant of the heavenly grace.
is she referring to the I forgot the name, the like the Catholic things where they would sell like the forgiveness?
Indulgences. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that we should read this as a reference to indulgences. That's probably right.
Okay.
Um, but she says, so it would be better for you to try to sell the air, better for you to be the merchant of the heavenly grace than to reduce a human spirit to disgrace of price by publication.
Hmm.
I think we're to understand, right? That publication is a disgracing of humanity by offering something for sale that shouldn't be sold.
Right. So she kind of equates like human spirit with the writing you produce. Like I guess some of your spirit is like it enfleshed in that writing, I
Yeah,
guess.
I think that's exactly right. So there's an interesting question with all Dickinson poems, which is how much of what we get in this poem is Dickinson's own opinion, right? Is she putting
Hmm.
on a character for us? Is this a kind of performance where there's some distance between the speaker in the poem and the author of the poem? It's hard to know, but it definitely seems suggestive that Dickinson herself was not very interested in selling her poems during her lifetime.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking that too. Okay. So that might be I mean but you said she published some of them, right? Or
Yeah, some of the
like
time
under
what
a
would
different
happen is
name or
she would write letters to her friends, and sometimes she would include a poem in a letter. And some of her friends would then take that and sell it to a magazine or try to get it published in a magazine. Um, so that was the way that some of her poems got out into publication. Okay, let's
okay.
move on to another one. This one is also, I think, about writing or about how Dickinson maybe experienced being a writer. And it makes a nice contrast to the one that we've just read. This is number 348. I would not paint a picture. I'd rather be the one its bright impossibility to dwell delicious on, and wonder how the fingers feel, whose rare celestial stir evokes so sweet a torment, such sumptuous despair. I would not talk like cornets. I'd rather be the one raised softly to the ceilings, and out, and easy on, through villages of ether, myself endued balloon by but a lip of metal, the pier to my pontoon. Nor would I be a poet. Its finer own the ear, enamored, impotent, content the license to revere. A privilege so awful, what would the dower be, had I the art to stun myself with bolts of melody?
Hmm.
So here
Yeah, those
we get, I hope you can see she marches through three different arts, right? The first stanza is
mhm.
about painting, the
Yeah.
second one is about music, and the third
Music.
one is about writing or poetry.
Mhm.
What is she saying here? Can you give me a sense of what she's after?
I I want to say it's almost like kind of a similar idea to what we were talking about. Like she doesn't want to be the one to I guess like in the third stanza, like doesn't want to be the one to put the feeling into words, but would rather be like have the feeling itself. I
Yeah.
want to say like I guess like I would not paint a picture. I'd rather be I'm not like 100% sure how to parse this. I'd rather be the one it's bright impossibility to dwell, but that sounds like to me like I'd rather like dwell on the subject of the picture, like and kind of experience that rather than make like a simulacrum of it.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that
you're right there. That's exactly right. So she's saying, I don't want to be a painter. I don't want to be the one who creates the picture. I want to be the one who looks at the picture. She said, the one to dwell on its bright impossibility, right? So the picture is something that has bright impossibility. It has colors in it. It's a sort of fantastic scene, maybe an impossible scene in reality. I want to be the one that dwells on that. I want to be the one who wonders how the fingers feel. These are the painter's fingers making the painting. I want to wonder how those fingers feel, uh, who are evoking so sweet a torment, such sumptuous despair.
okay? So I mean, so in the last one, she says, I like basically I wouldn't want to be a poet, but in this one, she says, I mean, she doesn't say I wouldn't want to be a painter. She says I wouldn't basically I would not want to paint, but she still like wants to feel how the painter's fingers feel creating, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And she wants to dwell on the work that's being created, right? She doesn't want to create the work, but she does want to know how it felt, and she does want to enjoy the created product.
Enjoy the created product,
Enjoy the painting that the painter created. Yeah. So that's
but
the dwelling delicious on its bright impossibility.
okay, but not actually created then, she's saying.
She doesn't want
Like,
to be the one to have to create it. And we see the same thing in the second one here. To talk like cornets, a cornet is like a trumpet, right? It's a horn.
mhm.
Um, she says, I don't want to make the music. I don't want to be the one who's playing the trumpet. I'd rather be the one who's listening to the music. And as you're listening, right, music is an art of the air. So she imagines herself being transported up into the air, raised softly to the ceilings, and out through villages of ether, as if she were a balloon, right, drifting away into the
Mm.
cosmos.
Almost like villages of clouds, she's saying, like
Exactly.
villages
That's
of
right.
air.
Yeah, villages of
And
air.
what is this by but a lip of metal that peer to my pontoon? What does that mean?
Yeah, this is really mysterious and it's very compressed and it's a metaphor, right? So there are like three barriers to entry here. The
Yeah,
lip
so
of
I mean like a
metal,
pontoon is like oh yeah, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
the lip of metal is the mouthpiece of the trumpet of the cornet. So
Oh,
she's saying this is the thing that's tying me back to earth, right? The pier to my pontoon. A pontoon is like a boat. The pier is the place where
mm,
you tie up your boat. And so she's saying, I'm like a balloon drifting off into space, and the only thing that's connecting me is the music that I'm hearing. It's the trumpet.
I see. Okay. And then nor would I be a poet. It's finer, I guess, to own the ear,
That's
would
right.
you
The
say?
dash there is taking the place of a missing word. It's
Mm,
finer to own the ear. It's finer own the ear. She has to leave it out for metrical reasons. She's trying to make sure that she has the right number of syllables and the right stresses in the right spots of the line here. So she says,
okay.
I don't want to be the one who has to recite the poems or write the poems. I want to be the one who gets to hear the poems. I want to own the ear that the poet is reciting to.
Okay, so the ear of the listener, not of the poet.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's the way to understand it. That she thinks what's good about a poem is to hear it.
Okay.
So she says, I would rather, it's finer, it's better to be the one who gets to own the ear. And now she's going to describe what happens when you own the ear and you hear a poem. Enamored, impotent, content, the license to revere. License here, this is poetic license, right? It's the freedom of the poet to say what he wants to say. And what's her attitude? She's enamored, she's falling in love with it. She's impotent, she's totally powerless before the poem, and she's content to revere what the poet has done by writing the poem.
Okay, that makes sense. And then she says a privilege so awful, what would the dower be? Like, what would the price be almost? Or
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the privilege here is the privilege of the poet. This is, again, poetic license, the ability to craft poems. She's saying, what would the cost be? What would be so bad? Or what would be the outcome? What would be the result, maybe? Had I the art to stun myself with bolts of melody. Now, the art to stun myself with bolts of melody, that's the poet's art. That's the ability to write these poems. And poems that are so great that they're going to stun even the person who wrote them.
so is she saying almost like she wouldn't want to be a great poet because she would like constantly be like stunning herself
That's
and
exactly
she
right.
wouldn't want to be like that? Okay.
And of course, the irony here, because I think that she's being a little bit wry. She is a poet, and she is a great poet. And I think that she's pointing out, oh, wouldn't it just be terrible if I were such a great poet that I could always amaze myself with how great my poems were?
Right. Okay. Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Like going through it, definitely on the first few times you read it, it's kind of hard to like understand what she's actually saying.
Yeah, and it's so compressed and so many overlapping and mixed metaphors that it can be hard.
Yeah, so let's go to the fourth one now.
Okay, so now let's turn to number 591. This is one of her more famous ones. Might be familiar. And this is sort of a change of topic here. We're not going to be talking about writing anymore so much now. We're talking about death and dying. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. The eyes around had wrung them dry, and breaths were gathering firm for that last onset when the king be witnessed in the room. I willed my keepsakes, signed away what portion of me be assignable. And then it was there interposed a fly with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me. And then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see.
Hmm.
What's the scene here? What's happening? Who's in the room? What's going on?
That's a good question. I mean, from what I gather here, it's not like a literal fly.
Yeah, we can talk about what the fly is. Yeah, but just at
Okay, but
the totally bare, like
oh, yeah, right. The literal meaning would be like I think she's probably lying in bed. I mean, there's like family around her, like crying, and then she dies, right?
That's right. That's the scene. So
Okay.
the speaker of the poem is on her deathbed, and weirdly, she's recounting this in the past tense, right? So she's already dead by the time she's telling us this story. She says, "Back when I died, I heard this fly, right? And there were people in the room." And okay, so you're exactly right. That's the scene. We can
Okay.
talk about what the fly means exactly. But here she is. She's trying to die, or maybe trying not to die, but she's dying, and she hears a fly. What did she expect to see or to hear, to witness instead of the fly?
What did she expect to see? I mean, it well, she mentions like the stillness in the room, but then she hears, I guess, like a buzzing, which she's like, okay, it must be a fly.
Right, yeah. So it's disturbing this calm room, the deathbed scene.
Hmm.
She says, you were right, that the people around, the eyes around, literally had wrung them dry. So they were all out of tears. They'd done their crying, the crying's over, no more tears to shed. And breaths were gathering firm for that last onset when the king be witnessed in the room.
Like, like God, are we saying? Like when she
Yeah, something
leaves?
like that. Exactly. She's
Okay.
expecting a sort of grand finale, right? She's expecting
Mm,
something magnificent to happen, something majestic to happen,
like trumpets or something,
like
like a
trumpets or something.
fanfare.
Yeah, she wants fanfare. She wants a big scene. And what does she get instead? She says, I had already gone through all of this bureaucratic nonsense, right? I had to make my will. I willed away my keepsakes. I signed away what portion of me be assignable. It's like this legal language. And then it
Hmm.
was, there interposed a fly, right? I
That's
thought
a
I was going to get the king coming.
Oh, okay. So right, so this was like the time when the king would be witnessed, but he
Yeah,
wasn't.
That's right. Breaths were gathering firm. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something huge to happen. And instead, what we got was this sort of annoying buzzing sound. A fly was in the room.
So is this like the fly? Is this sort of the perspective of like the audience? I was assuming this was like her perspective, and there wasn't actually a sound. But are we kind of interpreting it like the people surrounding her expected more, or like she expected more when she died?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I think at least the people around were expecting something, right? It's
Okay.
breaths were gathering firm. She doesn't say whose breaths they were, but someone's
Right.
preparing themselves for the king to be witnessed. Um, Maybe it's
Hmm.
the onlookers, maybe it's the person dying. And instead, what we get in the final stanza is this really personal look at what it must be like to die, right? Dickinson is,
Hmm.
or at least the speaker of the poem, is imagining for us, here's what it would be like to die, right? There interposed a fly with a blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me. What's going on there? Because it seems to me like she's mixing up her senses.
Yeah, because like there's blue, but describing like a sound, which is strange.
Yeah, it's
And
sort of like synesthesia, right? Like there's a mixing up of color and sound.
yeah, and the sound is somehow like also like a position because it's between the light and or maybe even like if you consider the light like actually going to death, like the buzzing almost like feels like it's preventing
Yeah,
that.
that's exactly right. So it's both positioned, but it's also substantial, right? It's like interposing itself between the light and me. It's blocking out, the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak.
Right. Okay. Okay. So I guess what you're kind of saying. So I think I started to kind of interpret this as like, okay, there isn't actually a fly, but she's kind of dying, like whatever, sense is going weird, and then starts hearing like a kind of buzz, like almost like a ringing in her ears. But I guess you're interpreting it as like there's like an actual fly, and it's like kind of it's like this should be so like magnificent, but there's just a fly. It's like it's just so kind of um like disappointing almost.
Yeah, yeah, there is. It's sort of she's using here what we call bathos, right? Which is like a sort of disappointment of big expectations in a sort of comic way, I think.
Okay.
But you're right to say that this can be read in multiple ways, and the poem is operating on multiple levels at the same time, right? I think there's the sort of literal story of there's a lady dying and she hears something, and then we can ask ourselves, okay, but what does this stand for? What does this mean? And I think this is where you're trying to get to. You're imagining the sort of breakdown of the senses at death. We have maybe in a sort of postmodern way a kind of unreliable narrator, right? Who,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
she's dying, because her senses are failing, um, maybe she thinks there's a fly and there's not really a fly.
Mhm.
Can you
Yeah.
trust
Is
someone
it?
after death?
Oh, wait. Sorry. What was that?
Can you trust the voice of this speaker after she's already
Oh,
dead?
right. I see that. Is it also kind of getting at like I don't know. You kind of everyone lives this life like however long it is, but then it's like okay, at some point you're just like it's over, and it's like okay,
Yeah,
like
yeah, that's exactly right. She's saying people expect it to be some majestic event and it's just sort of quotidian. Like there's some legal affairs to attend to and
right.
there's some crying. And then at the end, your senses fail and that's all that there is.
Okay. And she says, and then the windows failed. Would that be meaning like the vision of outside faded?
Yeah,
Like,
I think that's right. I think the windows here are the eyes, right? So it's sort of,
I see.
we get the view from behind her eyes and the windows are failing. She can't see through anymore. But even more than she says, I, there's a mystery in this poem, I think. And the mystery is
Yeah.
why doesn't the poem end? Then the windows failed, and then I could not see.
But
Why
it's,
does it
and then I
end? I
could
could
not
not
see
see
to
to
see.
see. Exactly.
Right. So I could not see to see almost makes me think like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like, I could not, well, I don't know. What's your interpretation? I don't know how to put that into words, what I think.
Yeah, it's very difficult, I think, to articulate exactly what she's pointing at here. I think I have a sense of it, and it's something like there was not just something between me and the thing I wanted to see, like a normal obstruction, but there was like
Mm,
something between me and like my sense of sight, right? Like the
mm,
obstruction is like back a layer. It's like
okay.
interior or something, right? It's a failing of the senses. even
Yeah, like the
before like a normal blindness.
yeah, like the subject is kind of failing, not like the object of what you're seeing.
That's right. That's exactly it.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I could not see like how do you kind of parse that? Like I could not see to see like I could not see in order to see or like I could not see I don't know how to
Yeah,
I mean it's not like a
grammatically, it doesn't
standard.
work. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
totally non-standard English. So I think your guess is as good as mine.
Hmm.
It's uh, it's a confusing one. I think one of the takeaways here is Dickinson is really sort of morbidly fascinated with death and dying, and of course,
Hmm.
she lived at a time when she would have been around a lot of people dying. She would have been present at deathbeds. You can sort of imagine her sitting, attending a dying person, and wondering to herself, "What would it be like if I were that person in the room?"
Right.
Instead of on this side of the equation. What would it be like to die as the senses fail? Is it magnificent? Is it quotidian? Is it sort of bureaucratic? Um, so I really like this poem, and I think that it's a really good one to compare with the next one, which is also about death and dying.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, should we start with the next one then?
Yeah, let's move on. This is number 448, and this is one of my favorite works of hers. I died for beauty, but was scarce adjusted in the tomb when one who died for truth was lain in an adjoining room. He questioned softly why I failed. For beauty, I replied. And I for truth, themself are one. We brethren are, he said. And so, as kinsmen met a night, we talked between the rooms until the moss had reached our lips and covered up our names.
Hmm.
Now, here's another mysterious one, I think. But what's the
Hmm.
literal scene here? What does she want us to get?
So it's I mean the narrator says she died for beauty. Like what that means, I guess you could speculate on that, but then she is laid in the tomb, and then right next to her is a guy who died for truth. So maybe like this one is maybe a little more easily interpretable. Maybe like you fought some war where both sides like think something different, like kind of like a battle, or like East versus West, like kind of like capitalism versus communism. I guess is one kind of
Yeah, could
idea.
be, could be.
But then yeah, I mean, and then so I think this is like obviously after they died, but they're still like talking to each other. I don't know whether it's specifically like their bodies or their spirits, whatever. Um, and then they talk basically until they decay, I guess.
Yeah,
So
that's
they
exactly
kind of
right. And
talk
their
forever
mouths get
until
covered.
yeah, until they're like it covers up their names. So I guess like on the label on the tombstone or whatever, it like almost their identities like I don't know if you could say merge or like they become like the difference between them becomes nothing.
Hmm. I like that reading. Yeah, that's really nice. I think that you got it. So that's exactly the scene. Lady is buried. I read it as a lady. It doesn't actually say that. True, right?
Hmm.
Beauty is buried. Someone who dies for truth is buried right next to him. They get talking. They say, "Hey, we have a lot in common. You died for beauty. I died for truth." Um, and then they talk between the rooms, which is to say,
Right.
between the graves.
So, I mean, I guess one kind of interpretation of this is like, okay, beauty and truth are the same thing. Like, I guess it kind of reminds me of like something Plato might say, like the good or like the beautiful and the true is like
Yeah,
one and the same. I
yeah.
don't know if he said that. It sounds like something he would say.
It does. It does. Yeah, I think the
Um,
direct reference here is to John Keats, who says truth is beauty, beauty, truth. And
okay.
also, there's a similar or related poem by Robert Browning where he talks about truth and beauty as well. I think that's who she had been reading rather than Plato, but you're right, it does sound like something Plato might say.
Right. Okay. I guess another thing I think of, I don't know if this fits as well, but maybe you could think of this like, I mean, everyone who dies for some ideal is like dying for the same reason, or like they're all the same in some way, or
Yeah,
maybe like even everyone who dies, period, is the same.
yeah, maybe
I
so.
don't know if you
Maybe
can go
so.
that far.
I suspect she would say that there are people who aren't dying for something quite as noble as the cause of truth or for beauty, right? For beauty's sake. Um,
Well, what would be an example of dying for beauty? Like, who does anyone do that?
it's a good question. I don't
Like
know if
a
Dickinson thought that she would die for beauty. I'm not sure.
okay.
But she, I think so interesting is the question of the man who dies for truth, the one who dies for truth. His question is why you failed, right? And I think that to me
Hmm.
that sounds like pining away, or like I imagine the artist up in his garret, right? Uh, he's poor, maybe he's not selling his poems for any money because publication is the auction of the mind of man, and he dies for beauty, right? For the sake of his art, he
Okay.
whiles away.
Right. So he doesn't take like a job doing as like a carpenter, for example, because he that would be like giving up the like the quest for beauty.
Yeah, maybe
I
so.
so it does I guess when I first read that, like he questioned softly why I failed. I guess I assumed that meant like why did you die? Because she says for beauty.
Yeah, no, I think
But
that's exactly right. But I think he's
okay.
saying, in the pursuit of what did you die? Did you slowly weaken and die?
So like implying you failed to defend beauty almost.
Or maybe
Like
just you died valiantly in defense of beauty or something like this.
and is that failing or is that not succeeding like
Well,
in
it's failing in a certain
fighting?
way, which is to say physically failing, right? Like your body gave out
Right.
in the pursuit of truth.
So dying more or less is
Yeah.
your interpretation. Okay. Um yeah, that's cool. I like the like until the moss had reached our lips. That's kind of an interesting imagery. I guess if I think of like someone decaying, I wouldn't really think of like there being moss there, but maybe I don't know. Does that even happen? It's interesting to think
Yeah,
about.
I don't know. And I think different people read this differently. Some people imagine this as being like in a mausoleum or something, like adjacent rooms of a mausoleum. I have always read it
Okay.
as being like tombs in the ground, like they're surrounded by dirt or something like this, and those are the rooms.
Oh,
Um,
oh, I
and
always okay. I imagine this as a yeah, like a rooms in a mausoleum. Like I, I definitely kind of read this as like above ground and like a stone structure almost.
Right, right. Yeah,
But
I'm interested by the moss. Maybe that's what makes me think that it's that these are just graves in the ground. That there's like a tombstone, like your classic
mm,
kind of cemetery with a plain tombstone and a hole in the ground where the body goes.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and then like I guess the moss covers up our name would be. I guess that makes me think more of like a gravestone. I mean, it's like open to the elements and it can get like moist and it gets sun for the moss, but
Right. And
it
there's that sort of confusion of like the tombstone, the moss covering up our names, and like the moss reaching our lips, right? It's like when the moss covers the tombstone, that's when like the decay is extended far enough to so that we can no longer talk between the rooms.
right. And I guess the implication is like when the moss reaches their lips, they stop talking,
Yeah,
or is it like they would? Because I don't think she's saying like they would talk forever. I mean, definitely like for a long time.
right.
And yeah, I guess I don't know if there's like a name for this. Is there sort of an idea that like I mean I don't think this really fits with like a Christian outlook, but like when you die, you kind of like you get like depersonalized and everyone kind of merges into the same being more or less. Is that do you kind of know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, I have a sense of what you mean. Yeah, I think you're right to say that's probably not the traditional Christian teaching.
Hmm.
But of course, Dickinson, I don't think we should read as a traditional Christian. I think she has some
Okay.
sort of idiosyncratic views. She certainly was raised in a Christian sort of society. She was definitely exposed to that. But in some of her poems, it's very clear, I think, that she has sort of uh, idiosyncratic views about religion.
Hmm. And do you see that interpretation as fitting with this poem? Like that, I mean, I guess just like the moss covering up our names, that it kind of seems to me like that could be read as like, I mean, everyone's name will be covered with moss at some point. So everyone, like, well, I mean, almost in this poem, she doesn't even like imply that anyone lives on. I mean, definitely like a little bit after you die, but definitely not like eternal life or anything.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a sort of naturalistic view of things, right? It's like maybe you exist as long as your body is there in the ground, but once you've decomposed, that's it. And no one's going to remember you, and there's nothing of you left, just moss. Um,
Right.
so I think that this kind of poem admits of lots of different readings. I like that
Hmm.
you point to that themself are one line, right? You're thinking you die for truth, you die for beauty, themself are one. Uh, and
Yeah.
that the sort of loss of the name, the loss of the ability to speak is sort of like the dissolution of the boundary between me and you or something like that.
Yeah. And maybe I I don't this is kind of a random thought. I don't know if this makes any sense, but like almost like beauty could die and then like truth dies, but and then they lose their names and they become one. I don't know. In like
Yeah,
like the numinal realm or something. I don't know
yeah,
if that
that's
is
right. That's
related at
right.
all, but that's one kind of idea this makes me think of. Um, cool. Should we go to the next one or
We should.
is there
Yeah,
anything more
I
for this
think that
one?
this
Okay.
one is a really good bridge between I heard a fly buzz when I died, which is sort of about the experience of death, what it would be like to die, and then I died for beauty, but was scarce adjusted in the tomb. That one's sort of about the sort of like natural life after death, in the grave, what happens to the body in the grave. And now this one I think is
Mhm.
sort of more about the afterlife as we often think about it. This is
Yeah.
number 373. This world is not conclusion. A species stands beyond, invisible as music, but positive as sound. It beckons and it baffles. Philosophy don't know, and through a riddle at the last, sagacity must go. To guess it puzzles scholars. To gain it, men have borne contempt of generations and crucifixion shown. Faith slips and laughs and rallies, blushes if any see, plucks at a twig of evidence and asks a vain the way. Much gesture from the pulpit, strong hallelujahs roll, narcotics cannot still the tooth that nibbles at the soul.
Mhm. Yeah, this one is really interesting. I think like after reading it a few times, I I don't really know how to describe what I think, but I think it's kind of she's kind of talking about like how people have a sort of wonder at what things are beyond the human. So like beyond just like our senses, whether it's kind of religion or like afterlife or just like some kind of divine knowledge that we can't really know. And that line at the end, like narcotics cannot still the tooth that nibbles at the soul. I mean, obviously narcotics can. I mean, like whatever the like the drugs are called, they like inject in you when you get a cavity filled that can like calm your toothache. But the questions that people have like, about the nature of life and reality can't be like really solved by anything. It seems. Yeah. So yeah, this is kind of interesting. I don't know if you agree with that kind of interpretation, but this is something I've been thinking a lot about just with regards to like epistemology and philosophy. Like what can we know? And it seems like people don't really know what we can know, honestly. And like you can kind of like study things and learn more about like the nature of things, as they are in themselves, but you don't really know how close you actually get to knowing anything at all.
Yeah, I think that's a great reading of this. Maybe we can step through this quickly just to make sure we're
Yeah.
on the same page about it all. But I think that you're exactly right. This is about what we can know, what we can't know, what happens
Mhm.
after death. I think this world is not conclusion, right? There's another world beyond, another world after, even.
Yeah, and she says a species stands beyond. So it almost makes me think like she's questioning the idea that it's just like, okay, you have your human soul that lives on. It like I think I, I feel like she's saying species as like a type of being, but I mean, I guess you could also think a species like there's like a species of animal that you live on as, but it might not be anything like how we live as humans,
Yeah,
maybe.
I think that's exactly right. And Now we have these contrasting comparisons, right? The species that stands beyond is both invisible as music and also positive as sound. So you can't
Hmm.
see it the way that you can't see music, but it's definitely there the way that like sound is a real physical thing that's happening, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Is she, do you think she's saying like this thing? I don't know if she's saying like this thing after life like exists in this world as well, but it's invisible, or is she saying like it could be a separate world still, but
Yeah, I think that's how I
or
read
like
it. That
okay,
that there's another world, right? This world isn't the last world. It's not conclusion. There's another
right.
world. There's a species. There's something. There's some kind of thing out there that is beyond, and you can't see it,
Hmm.
but it's definitely there.
Yeah. It's almost like this, it's I don't know how to describe this. I guess there are various like throughout the history of Western philosophy, a lot of kind of like in more in the olden days, people used to have sort of like proofs of the existence of God and things like that. But it almost feels like when you have something like this, that's more like about the feelings, maybe. That's not trying to say like this exists for certain. I mean, she is saying like this world is not conclusion, and it's not really like an argument or a proof, but it's almost like she's saying like this is something you can feel,
Yeah,
maybe.
I think that's right, and I think that your comparison here to other ways of knowing is exactly what she turns to next, right? She says,
Hmm.
philosophy don't know, and sagacity must go, right? Like wisdom
Right.
is no use here. All the philosophers can't tell us the answer to this question.
Right. Like metaphysics, it kind of I mean, it kind of like breaks down, right? When you talk about like, okay, is things like is the world like endless or limited, or like is it eternal or like limited in time, things like that, where it's like I don't know if you could ever really like say for sure. So you kind of like yeah, your philosophy is gonna have some limits.
Yeah, that's exactly the vibe here. And now, so she said what the philosophers think. Now she's going to turn and she's going to look at religion, right? She says,
Hmm.
faith slips and laughs and rallies, blushes, if any see. Faith is like a girl who uh, is embarrassed and wants to make sure no one saw that she slipped. She
Hmm.
blushes. And now she's going to reach out to try to stabilize herself as she slips, right? She plucks at a twig of evidence. She's looking for something to bear her
Right.
up, a way to know.
Yeah,
And
evidence or like a proof,
that's right,
for example,
exactly. And what is this? She asks a vein the way,
like a weather vane, like
a
that
weather
just
vane.
points the direction of the wind,
Yeah, she's looking for uh, an idea about which way to go.
but it's just random, really, or
It
nature
doesn't seem
determines
very
it.
hopeful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet, what do we get from the pulpit? What do we hear from the preacher? Much gesture from the pulpit. Strong hallelujahs roll, right?
Hmm.
Religion is confident, maybe,
Yeah,
but
it's
it
certain
seems,
about how things are.
yeah, it seems insufficient here. And now
Hmm.
she also turns to drugs, right? Narcotics cannot still the tooth that nibbles at the soul.
Right. Yeah, yeah, I like this one. I don't know if there's like a name for the specific like feeling that it evokes, almost like a like numinous or like numinal, like I don't even know how to describe it, but it's yeah, it's really interesting. Just kind of it's something I think about a lot, just like how I mean, kind of we see reality like through our like human senses, and we kind of think we know how things are, but we like really don't know what things are like in themselves. And it's yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting. Um, and it's yeah, kind of like I was saying before, this isn't like Plato making a like philosophical, like logic-based argument that like the soul is eternal and like obviously for like this and that reason, like obviously like a soul cannot be damaged, it cannot die. So that's why he's not worried about like death when he gets, poisoned. Um but yeah, I think I things like this are kind of interesting because they can make you, I guess, feel something different, like kind of just feeling different ideas and just different ways that the world might be and you kind of just like have to accept at the end that you're not really going to know while you're alive, probably.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I like the mention of Plato. You can remember, right, that in Plato's Republic, when he's building the perfect city, he doesn't let the poets in. You remember this?
Yeah.
He says the poets they have no place in the Republic. They're gonna try to seduce you with sweet sounding lies, right?
Mhm.
And I think that he might say that about Dickinson in this sort of instance too.
I mean, yeah, probably. But it's like, yeah, I think basically all art is lies, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's like that it doesn't have value or that it doesn't kind of that it can't be like as like I guess almost like that it can't give you knowledge in the same way that like a an argument can, but it almost seems like it can in a different way. I don't know if have you ever heard this like distinction like the truth of fact, the truth of feeling?
Hmm.
Um, it's something that I think like the author Ted Chiang came up with, and I don't think this was exactly how he described it, but it's this is something that sort of reminds me of like that there's sort of like truths you can know, and then there are like truths that you can feel almost.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah, I
that
don't.
is kind of the distinction Dickinson is pointing out when she's talking about truth versus beauty, right? That
Mhm.
themselves are one at the end of the day. Like maybe there's multiple ways to get to the same place.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. Hmm. Well, cool. Yeah. Anything else about this last poem?
I think that's all I've got.
Cool. Yeah, I think me too. Yeah. Thanks, Sam. Any closing remarks before we end here?
Just thanks for talking about Emily Dickinson. This is some fun stuff. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I definitely like have not read much poetry in my life, and I kind of when I read these for the first time, I was like, yeah, I don't know if I really understand what's going on, but yeah, I think once you kind of walk through it with someone, I mean, it's obviously with someone who kind of understands it, then I think it definitely can make a lot more sense, and especially if you just like read it a few times, like over different days, even kind of like just like poking away at it a bit more and trying to like get what meaning you can out of it. Um, yeah, it's really interesting. And then I also like in university, I did like study computer science, and I never really took any literature classes or anything. And I guess I didn't really see like the point in studying stuff like this. But yeah, after I graduated, I started reading a lot more and kind of like started to discover the value in, I mean, like for me specifically, like literature and like some of the classics. But um, and it's cool to also see like I guess like why people read and write poetry and like what the value of it can be. Yeah. So
I'm
cool.
really glad to hear that.
Yes. So yeah, thanks for walking through that with me. Yeah, appreciate it.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah. See ya.